Right. So yes. Yeah. Just like you mentioned. Would you mind introduce yourself a little bit to our classmate? Like you just mentioned, your education background and your current professional position in public health.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Paula Clark, and I work at Jackson County Health Department in Murfreesboro, Illinois. I'm just upon the eve of my 30 years here in public health. I am the Division Director of HIV and Sexual Health Services. So I am one of 6 management team that help run the health department. I have 3 degrees from SIU, all in health education. So I have my bachelor's in community health, which I was going a school health route with that. I do have my teacher certificate in health and a minor in driver education. At the time, there was not an MPH, so then I went to get my master's in education with a concentration in community health. And then just a few years after that, they started offering an MPH. So I went, I was one of the first few graduates of the MPH program. At that time, I already had such a long career in public health. I didn't really feel like I needed that MPH, but I just felt strongly that I wanted to have an MPH since I did work in public health. So that's a little bit about me.
So so what inspired you to pursue a career in public health, and how did you first become interesting in this field?
Okay, well, I think the first thing that got me interested in health education was that I had a really good high school health education teacher. It's kind of funny because other people I know went into it because they had such a very poor health education teacher and they knew they could do better. But I had a really strong, kind of blunt, he was a coach, but he was a health education teacher. And so I've just always been very prevention minded. And I think it's interesting that I have 4 sisters. And so even within family members, there can be a big difference in the prevention mindedness of family members. And I've just always been very prevention minded. As I said earlier, my plan was to teach school health in high school and to coach softball. I ended up doing an internship in public health along that route. I just decided that, and I kind of blinked, and it's 30 years later, and I'm still here. So I started my internship here in 1993, which is 30 years ago, and then I gradually got hired on a few grants. So even though I did believe my true love was going to be school health and coaching, I kind of diverted and went into public health, and that's where I've ended up staying.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And so since our class is the leadership in public health, so we learn a lot about the style of leadership. For example, we know that there are many kind of leadership, like democratic or servant style. And what would you describe your leadership style, and and also how has it evolved over time?
I would say that my leadership style is I really try to lead by example. I usually do not ask my staff to do anything that I won't do myself or help them with. I've been here so long that I've been in all of their shoes, so I'm asking them to do things that I have already done. I really enjoy leading my team by best practices. So not only best practices that I have experienced in the past, but we are constantly trying to ask ourselves, how could we have done this better? So if we're interacting with the client, interacting with the public, sending out a press release, collecting data, whatever it might be, I'm constantly asking my staff and myself, okay, here's how it went this time. How can we do better the next time? So, and then I would also say my leadership skills are, if you are a proven entity, I'm going to be less hands-off. I don't like to micromanage. I like to train my staff to where I'm confident that I give them a task and they're going to complete it 200% as good or better as I would myself. And that sometimes takes time for them to learn their role and understand my expectations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So nice. So what are some of the biggest challenge you facing in public health today, and how do you how do you navigate those challenges in your own work? It doesn't necessarily need to be related to COVID, because we will have a I will have a question regarding COVID
Sure,
later. So you can be any challenge you have faced before. So
sure. I would say most people's challenges in public health is funding, because funding can be so sporadic. It can be very content related, meaning you have a grant to do a specific task. By the time, a lot of times you have that program up and running and that it's the funding could be over. So I think that funding is a big challenge. I also think right now that workforce is a big challenge, that trying to make sure that we have a workforce that is committed to public health and has integrity to public health. I won't say right now that, or rarely ever in the past, funding is not my problem, because I have a very large regional HIV program that I run that is about $1.3 million. So I normally don't have the problem that other programs have in my agency. But as HIV becomes more of a chronic disease, it's not a death sentence, and I can also see that funding kind of drying up a little bit. Funding has not been my problem, but I try to do my part with growing a successful workforce in public health, and particularly in HIV and sexual health, since HIV is changing so much that and most people just getting out of college, HIV has been here for as long as they have been alive. So it's not as big of an issue as it once was. So I think it's very important that we are growing that continued public health workforce.
got you. Thank you. And the next question is, can you describe a time that when you had to make a difficult decision as a public health leader, and how do you approach the decision-making process?
Okay. I think one of the biggest decisions that's hard to make is how to allocate funding to where you're getting the biggest bang for your buck, and that you're being frugal with your funding that you have. So even though I do have a fairly large program, we are trying to provide direct client services, and I'm wanting to make sure that we are contracted with providers who are going to give us our biggest bang for the buck, so that we can help as many clients as possible, and trying to be fair with that. That is this a client that is meeting all program eligibility, and that they are going to be a healthier person based on this funding. So probably the most difficult decisions that I am trying to make is the best use of limited funds in regards to HIV funding. But I would say a lot of administration in public health is that same thing. We have a lot of programs that may not be wholly or fully funded, and I'm sure my administrator would say it's hard to close a program because they're not fully funded when you know that program is really needed. And if a lot of local tax dollars have to go toward that program, then that's a really hard decision. Can we afford to dollars toward that program if it's not fully funded?
Thank you. And next, what role do you see the technology playing in the future of public health, and how do you stay up to date with the new development in this field? For example, Zoom is kind of like a new technology for us today, so we can have an interview on Zoom. We don't have to do in person. So what do you see like other technology playing in the future of public health today?
I see technology only increasing, and very similar during COVID. We all had to learn how to do Zoom meetings or WebEx, where maybe other people did that all of the time, but in local public health, a lot of times we were still trying to meet face to face. We also did use a lot of scheduling technology like Amtrak to schedule all of our vaccination clinics for COVID. So I did have to learn how to do that. I am not a real comfortable technology person, and I greatly rely on the younger coworkers that I have to keep up with that. When we were contact tracing, we were doing a lot of that with technology, with a program called Salesforce. And so, from the time that somebody tested positive and it created them a case, and all of our contacts, even some of our phone calls would be via technology and not necessarily a regular phone call. So we had to track a lot of that through technology. So that was a learning curve. Also in the middle of a pandemic, which when you're already really busy and trying to learn new technology, but I do see it only increasing, and then that's where our younger workforce comes in, because I think that they're more comfortable with it and more willing to learn it than somebody like myself.
Got you. Right. Next, how do you? So next question is, how do you approach building and maintaining relationship with other leader in public health field, and both within your organization and also externally?
Okay. Well, Jackson County Health Department is really the leading health department in our region. We're about the lower 19 counties of Southern Illinois, so we're about the third bottom of the state, and we are really a leader. So I do approach my partnerships in that we have a very respected health department. And again, during COVID, we reached out to a lot of our other local health departments to provide them assistance in how we were handling contact tracing or how we were scheduling vaccinations. So I do rely on trying to keep that good relationship, but also be providing support as a leader of our health department. And then also with a lot of our local partners, we really helped each other a lot through the pandemic. And so my approach is just trying to be real open. Hey, here's what we can offer you. What can you help us with where some of our gaps in programming are? So it's really just a large community partnership where we're always helping each other.
Got it. Right. The next question is the COVID-19 pandemic has a profound impact on public health globally, and how has your work been impacted by the pandemic, and what lessons have you learned about the public health leadership during this time?
Well, to say that the pandemic has impacted our work is a understatement. It has totally consumed our work for the last 3 years, and we had to continue to go ahead and manage our existing programs. So the pandemic has impacted public health like no other in the last 100 years. Normally our work week is 35 to 40 hours, and for over 2 years I worked between 80 and 100 hours a week. So since as I said, I oversee the HIV programming, I have 13 staff that provide HIV case management, that provide disease intervention services to follow up people on new diseases that they may have gotten. We're providing PrEP, we're providing retention services. So when the pandemic came around, my division, unlike most, we do contact tracing all the time with disease intervention. And so we were kind of ahead of the game. So, the one thing that I think health education is it is doing the same thing with new topics all the time. We are planning, implementing, and evaluating all the time. That is health education. That is public health. Planning, implementing, and evaluating. So with the pandemic, we just had to do that a lot quicker. I would say that a lot of our past drills, we had a lot of emergency preparedness drills over the last 10 years that really did help us get our feet on the ground. And then we had to be ready to just change guidance day to day or week to week. And a lot of the public is quick to blame CDC or blame the government for how everything rolled out. I do not feel that way at all. I feel like that public health in general and the CDC in general took the information they had each day and and acted upon that information. And when the information changed, which that also did happen regularly, as the public knows, the guidance for isolation and quarantine changed, the guidance for vaccination changed, the etiology just of the disease in general changed. And we had to learn to roll with it. And we had to learn to try to get out the changes of the guidance to the public in a timely manner, whether that be through social media, press releases, or as we were quarantining people. We would have to explain, yes, quarantine used to be this, but now it's this. So I don't blame the government or CDC for any of that. Information was rolling out at a very quick pace, and everybody did their best to keep up with that information. So it's definitely had a profound impact on my career in public health. I feel like I am still exhausted from that. But I feel extremely proud of the work that our health department did. Illinois Department of Public Health put out COVID metrics as far as lives saved, infections saved, and Jackson County Health Department was leaps and bounds above all health departments in the whole state of Illinois as far as how we handled our COVID infection. So I'm very proud of that. And it was a very interesting time to be involved in public health, and a very historical time to be involved in public health that I'm glad I was involved in.
Thank you. In your opinion, what are the most important skill or qualities for success as a public health professional, and how do you cultivate those skills in yourself and also others?
I really think it's important that that people love and believe in prevention if they're going into health education, leading that task of prevention all the time in your life is very hard. But I think that if you could just always make decisions based on what is the best for the community, then that is always going to lead you. I think that it's very important to be able to be very versatile in public health. Like I said, you're doing the same tasks, you're just constantly learning a new content. I mean, whether you're talking about HIV, whether you're talking about syphilis, whether you're talking about COVID, whether you are involved in environmental health, a lot of it is prevention in nature, and you're learning to try to teach preventative skills. And so you have to have good communication skills and be versatile in general. The one thing I think that I have been somewhat disappointed about is back to the pandemic, is that not everybody in public health or in a healthcare setting were on board with vaccinations. I just think that's quite the conflict. We are in public health. We should be expecting our coworkers to be vaccinated. We should be expecting our healthcare facilities to be leaders, asking and in believing in the diaphragm and believing in the research of the vaccine. And so, if you work in public health, you should expect to have coworkers that have that same belief. And that was not always the case. Sometimes some of the healthcare workers we had to deal with were some of the worst to practice what we needed to practice during the pandemic. That was very frustrating for me.
Right. The last question I have is, what advice would you offer to someone like us, the college student who is considering a career in public health, and what do you see as the most promising area of growth and innovation in the field of public health?
But when you provided me these questions, I kind of joked when you said, what advice would you offer somebody? I thought, well, marry somebody rich, because this is not a career that you're going to get rich unless, I guess, maybe you're head of the CDC. But I think, again, to have a basic dedication and love for prevention programming and just for public health fundamentals. As I was just saying, that I think that's very important. You know, I joke when the days are hard that I'd like to go work in a factory and put together my 100 parts and take my lunch and go back and put together my 100 parts. But I obviously, and most people who are working in the health field are people who want to make a difference in their daily job. I couldn't have a job where I was just putting together some widgets and going home. I have to feel like that I'm making a difference. So having that commitment to public health and to prevention, I think is very important. And then I would say the most upcoming and growing part of this field is just disease intervention and tracking and the technology of that tracking. So we are seeing a huge increase in syphilis nationwide. We were down to probably single digits, 1 or 2 a year. And last year in my county alone, we had 45 cases of syphilis. Thus far, just this first quarter, we've had 22 cases of syphilis. So tracking those diseases, trying to get people tested and treated. Syphilis is just an example. COVID is another example, but disease intervention, tracking, and the technology of that, I think is up and coming, and where we can see a really big difference in public health innovations.
All right. Yeah, that's thank you so much. And that's all my question. And
Okay.
let me stop recording.